So I wanted to talk today about a little bit more about the hidden properties of water and kind of some of the things that I've discovered in my journey. I've been working with water as a water professional now for going on 14 years. So none of this is available as common knowledge, but I can tell you, I know for a fact 100% that everything here is true. And the reason I know is because it's rooted very, very deeply in history, not the history that we necessarily read and understand in school, but the history that we discover when we self-educate and read on our own, through volumes and volumes. So all the water equipment that we build in our business and that we sell through HelixLife is rooted in this technology. And so I'm going to share a little bit about it. So, I already talked about this. I've got a professional background in water treatment and designing water equipment in, professional installations and all the things, that they teach in these classes. I have a certification, or I did it one time, to prove I have a diploma, which is on the wall of my office. And I've also developed many, many water technologies. And I say technologies because it's way beyond the average what you would see in a water treatment system. We're going to cover that too. And I've also done and advised and helped people on, hundreds and hundreds of various installations, everything from commercial applications of our equipment to, full-blown sanitation systems to, chlorine injection systems and holding tanks and, the whole deal, the whole gamut. And, I've always found it to be very fascinating, but most of it just deals with removing contaminants. And there's a whole lot more to what's going on with water. And really, that's what they taught us in school. They taught us that water was H2O. Water is the same here and everywhere. And the only thing that separates water is mineral content and, pH because of mineral content. And then, what contaminants may or may not be present in the water. And that was the end of it. And then we saw, the first devices come out really in the 80s where they were prevalent, where people said, hey, some of these disinfectant compounds like chlorine are bad for you. And we need to put this through some kind of filtration to help remove that, because some of these things are actually toxins. And, yes, they kill bacteria, and surprise, surprise, over time and distance, they will kill you as well, and your ability to fight disease and all the rest of it. And then we learned about the fluoride additives, and they've just been continuing to stream chemicals. There's something like 40,000 chemicals out there in the aquifers right now. There's about 25 or 30 that are routinely reported on in these water tests. The rest of it is just, swept under the carpet. It's never really addressed. And we don't know, and most of these chemicals were developed during wars, to kill and create havoc, for the enemy, and yet they found their way into our aquifer. And then, of course, all the pharmaceutical runoff is there, and all the agricultural chemicals. I mean, we do or have done a lot of tobacco farming here in the area of North Carolina that I live. So all the farmers, for 100 years have been pounding the ground, with these chemical additives and, the Roundups and the defoliants and, on and on and on. And all of this stuff, of course, works its way down into the water source, the aquifer inside the ground. And much of it has never been tested. People have no idea what's in their water. And it's the same thing in the cities, right? So whenever you have an increase in population density, and even more so when you get to the coastal areas where they have the perpetual warm weather, the disinfectant compound load has to be increased in the water to ensure that we don't have, unhealthy bacterial growth, because we don't want that, right? So they use chemicals to fight that back. The problem is the water is stored normally in municipalities and storage systems. Those storage systems, while they might be free of bacteria, are still stagnant of energy. And many cities now, they re-machine or refilter wastewater, brown water, water that has that stuff in it that we don't want to talk about. They refilter that and send that back out, as drinking water. And, if we're just testing for bacteria and we're loading acids and other things into the water to kill the bacteria, and they say, hey, this water is testing fine. Well, what if there's other properties to water that are occulted or hidden behind the scenes that we can't see and that we can't test for and that we don't even know about. And most people, I mean, what if that's the case? What if there's an energy profile or what we call a structure to that water and it carries some of that through? Could it be that this water may not be the healthiest for us to drink, even though it's chemically free of tested bacteria? The answer, of course, is yes. So, you know, when you start to look at the water structure and you understand what that means, it really opens up a whole area of science, which is why for 70 years this has been suppressed. I mean, they've proved in a lab 75 years ago that water had a structure, that it was much more than chemicals, that there was a bonding process that took place called covalent bonding between the hydrogen molecules. And all of this was very, very significant, and very significant even more so in the body. And it was completely dismissed and passed over and actually shunned. And, you know, there's been 7 or 8 people that have won Nobel Science Prizes associated with what I just talked about. And it still is not taught in school and still is not widely understood. Why is that? You know, why are there things out there that deal with science that are beneficial to us health-wise, and these things are suppressed and hidden from the general populace? What could possibly be the motivation for this? I mean, the world can't be full of just evil people, right, that are looking to keep us sick and unhealthy. That can't be the case, and surely it's not. But what happens is, you know, if you take a population like the Hunza Indians in the Himalayas, where routinely they live to be over 120 years, and the women are healthy and happy and vibrant, you know, up to that age. They give birth, you know, to healthy children at 60 years and up. You know, why is this? Well, you know, we think that a lot of it has to do with the water that they have access to. They get this mountain or glacial runoff water that they call glacial milk. And when you look at the water, it's full of air bubbles, it's full of minerals. It has a vibrancy and an energy, a kinetic energy. It has an organic water structure that's like what the Creator intended for us to drink. And we already know that that our bodies are 99% water by molecular count. So 99+% of all the water molecules in our body are water molecules. Now, yes, it's about 70% by weight, because some of the things, you know, weigh more, right? But the fact is by molecular count, it's over 99%. So we are, in essence, water beings. And if we're not for water, we would not obviously be what we are. So it's far more than just dehydration. There's a lot more going on there. So we're going to talk about some of that here in about 15 minutes. Hopefully I can cram it into that. So we start to look at this closer, and you know how, like, we can hear a song over and over again, you know, even on the radio or in church, and then we can kind of repeat that. I mean, I don't have a really good singing voice, but I can kind of repeat a jingle or rehearse a jingle, and we can all do this, right, at different levels. Some of us have better voices than others. But what happens is, you know, we attribute that to something that we call memory, right? So there's some kind of an imprint in our brain, which, by the way, is 90% water by weight. And, you know, that memory is a pattern, right, that we've memorized. The music's a great example because it's a pattern, right? It's a frequency, a repetitive frequency pattern or a melody. And so when we remember that, that's because we're remembering a frequency imprint. So, you know, how do we do it? How does the brain do that? You know, nope. Has anybody explained to you on the line tonight how that's happened? I've never seen a vivid explanation for that, but I can tell you, just because of a basic understanding, it's a pattern. The brain has captured a pattern that it can then repeat. Same thing with all of our memories, they're patterns. So if this is true, then it must have something to do with the water, which is over 90% of the brain. And of course, they've absolutely proven in science that it has. So I would profess to you tonight that what this is this is the structure of water being revealed in these discoveries. And that this is all made possible by water, and more importantly, by water's ability to retain and recall a certain specific structure. So if this is happening in our brains, it must also then be happening in all water, and of course it is. And then maybe this is what leads to the unseen or occulted communication, because we know that exists, right? I mean, we can walk into a room with certain people and feel a certain way, or talk with people on the phone and get a certain feeling. And then we can talk with other people and get a certain and there's kind of like a mild telepathy going on, isn't there? If nothing more than a sharing or an understanding of emotions, right? And we can all feel a certain way when we walk into an uncomfortable situation. And, what really triggers those emotions? Well, I would suggest that it's water. I would also suggest that the mechanism, we all know about the law of attraction, right? And the fact that we can focus on certain ideas and concepts and actually will those things into being. The Bible tells us we can do that. Right? So think about that for a second. So what is the mechanism? There has to be a mechanism that makes all this happen. The law of attraction, the sharing of emotions, the good feeling, the bad feeling, the good vibes, the bad vibes. What is that? Well, I would tell you that it's all about water. And the more you read, the more you see that that's the case. So what happens to water molecules in water, be it bulk water, tap water, well water, or the water that our equipment produces, when you look at that water, there's certain geometric patterns of how the water molecules form. And the thinking is that these are representations of frequencies, just like a frequency wave goes out. And we talked about music, right? Didn't that sound good? You can tell I have a great voice. So the frequency wave goes out, and we've all seen the cymatics, right? Where they take the sand and they vibrate music into it, and it all takes geometric shapes. Well, this same thing is happening with water. And of course, water is everywhere. And I remind you that we are 99% water by molecular count. So there's 99 molecules of water in our body for every one molecule of something else, whatever that something else is. So obviously we get a certain feeling from music. We get a certain feeling from spoken voice. And it's more than that, right? I mean, there's stuff going on that we can't see, taste, and feel that's happening. And yes, our body is reacting and responding to all of that. How do the birds know when an earth incident is going to happen an hour before it happens? Well, it's because they're picking up frequencies of that happening, right? Well, that means that there must be an intention or a mindful focus that happens before the event, or else how could the birds know that a volcano is going to explode? I mean, sure, there's tremors and things that set that off, but the point is there's vibes that are happening behind the scenes, and maybe, just maybe, we can learn how to tune ourselves in to capturing that and understanding that. And the fact is that we can. There's certain people that have, right? We call them telepaths. There's certain people that have telepathic and empathic, right? Empath, right? And empathic abilities. This is an absolute truth. In fact, there are people that can project themselves in thought to a completely other place on the earth, and maybe even in a different time, right? I've read accounts, and I'm sure many of you have, of this happening. I forget what it's called, but of course it was explored and proven and exploited, by the governments and by the military, like everything else is, because they're the ones with all the funding, and they're the ones that attract all the scientists, and they've got money for all the laboratory equipment. The rest of us are trying to put gas, in the car and now buy bottled water. And so think of this. And so, we need to delve into this. This is a subject that we need to delve into. I mean, I can have 20 people stand up on the call and say, hey, I lost 20 pounds with this water. I had all kinds of emotional problems. Now they're going away. I have different dream sequences that are happening. I can do all of that. Okay. But at somewhere along the line, somebody has to talk a little bit about what the basis of that is, because if we don't do that, then there are those of us from New York that would say, maybe all this is just bullwinkle. Where's the science, right? How many people have asked you, well, where's the science to support that? I see the science that tells me that it's okay to, drink Coca-Cola, drink fluoride, and eat Big Macs at McDonald's once in a while, right? It's all about moderation. But where's the science to show that all these health products are really good for you? And of course, a lot of it doesn't exist because there isn't any funding to do it. So you have to become successful it's like they say farming is an occupation that you have to save up for, right? It's a joke. And it's the same thing with water science, because there ain't no funding for water science. There's no funding for showing how health foods make you healthy. There's no funding showing how nutritional supplements that they can't patent, are good for you, right? But we know that they are because of how we feel. So the other thing too is that, we live in a solid world. We're taught just enough about liquids so that they fit into the solid paradigm. We're not really taught about, fluid dynamics. We're certainly not taught about water structure. We're not taught about any. They spend about 5 minutes on water, in chemistry and physics in high school, and that's it. Maybe a little more in college. I don't know. I never went to a full college education. But as we look at this closer, what we find out is that water is the chief transport mechanism of everything that's happening behind the scenes. And we even find out that when we spin water very, very quickly in a certain fashion, that there's an energy and a frequency that's thrown off of that becomes very, very healing in the body. In fact, there was an Austrian naturalist, physicist, one of the brightest people that ever lived. His name was Victor Schauberger, and he was an Austrian naturalist. He was hired when he was a young man by an Austrian company to help redesign their log flumes in the forest, and was able to increase the production of the trees that were brought out of the forest by like 100-fold. And the way he did it is he mimicked in the log flume construction the current patterns that he saw in the natural streams. So it was the bending and arcing of the streams and the fact that the water created a turbulence over the rocks that gave him the idea of creating a log flume design that would move 100 times its own weight. And he created a propulsion mechanism with nothing more than flowing water. And he was so successful in his development of things like the repulsator, I forget how you pronounce it, that he was actually captured in World War II by the Germans, forced into one of those secret, below ground cave laboratories, and was actually the man behind a lot of the Nazi inventions, which were very, very significant. I mean, there was a serious amount of occulted or hidden Nazi inventions during World War II, and that technology hasn't gone away. A lot of it was brought over to this country in the early 40s by the rocket scientists, right, in a government operation called Operation Paperclip. Who was the famous rocket guy? His name escapes me, but the German fellow that pioneered the whole rocket, all of NASA and everything, was one of these people, one of these German scientists. And so fascinating stuff. And in fact, we believe, based on the readings that we've done, that Schauberger actually developed an anti-gravitic or anti-gravity technology based on the control of the vortexing of water. And why is it that whenever we see a science movie, we see people go back in time like Stargate, it always involves water? Have you ever noticed that? Every time you see it depicted, it always involves water. Why does the frequency and energy tunnels that they've been developing for years in Switzerland have to do with water? Why are the Great Pyramids, which are known to be energy generators, why are they built on top of very specific water channels, underground water? All this stuff ties together. So the point is that we have a technology, yes, it's in its infancy here at HelixLife, where we not only take and create an antioxidant drinking water that has many, many healthful properties that mimic the water we find in nature, but we also have created something called the Helix Energizer, which is a double helical vortex chamber that actually takes and puts that water into a double helical spin, like what you see in a lot of these touted healthy water sources. And we know for a fact that it creates a water that just has a jacked off the charts, energy quotient to it. And all of this is so beneficial in the body because it means that the water that you drink, much of it can go to work a lot faster because the body has to do a whole lot less to manipulate that to get it to do what it needs than it does if you're just drinking this dead, lifeless, chemically treated water. So it could be that the water technology that we have here at HelixLife could really be the health foundation for everybody out there. And that's how significant. So I wanted to say all of that just to tell you that what we've got here is pretty special. You start to look at the, the other properties, the anomalous or things that don't make common sense properties about water, and there's just a ton of them, right? The list goes on and on. I mean, I really became fascinated to learn about Samuel Hahnemann, who was really the pioneer of medicine here in the US. In fact, there's a statue built to him in Washington, D.C. There I am 8 or 9 years ago, a little thinner, standing in front of the Samuel Hahnemann statue, right, which is on DuPont Circle. Think of this. Now this guy, this was the medicine of the age. Before they came up with the drugs, before they introduced the pharma, right? They always had the herbals and other natural food-based stuff, but the pharma was new, right? 120 years ago. Before that, it was all about homeopathy. That was the modern science and how effective it was. It was effective for thousands of years. It's still effective today, but it's suppressed. Even in Europe, where it's been, accepted for all this time, they're starting to suppress it there. They're starting to say, well, you can do homeopathy, but you can't really make any kind of curative claim. Even people that are licensed, that went to school for it, that have been practicing for 20 years, that have giant, multi-hundred patient bases, even these people are being shut down because it's a way to create health in the body without the use of pharma. And it's a no-no in today's modern world. What is it based on? What's it all about? Well, I'm going to explain this to you, and then we're going to close. So what happens is I told you that water can be formed, right? Or carry when we say information, we're talking about water molecules are now in a certain formation, and this carries frequency. It carries the memory of frequency. And homeopathy is all about the memory of frequency. So what happens is we take a substance like a drug, and this has been done before, and we take it and we put a drop of it in a gallon of water. And then we do things to dilute that down to the point where it's sometimes 10, 20, and 30 times diluted. So this is when you see things like a 30x homeopathic dilution. It's been diluted down 30 times. Now, what that means in science is that there is not one drop of that material left in that water, not one drop. In fact, it's not one drop in the oceans of not one planet, but hundreds of, there's nothing detectable about that original ingredient left in that water. It's just water. It's just water. So there was a scientist 10 years ago that did a series of videos and won a Nobel Science Prize. And what this guy did was he took a drop of a toxin. It was, I think it was the AIDS virus, but it was a toxin. And he put it down into the water, into the test tube, and then he diluted it down, to the 15 or 20 time dilution. I forget the exact number. So there was nothing left of that in there. There was a frequency imprint, which is what's left. And then he set that next to another test tube that was separated from it, that was pure water, that never had the homeopathic dilution. And then he exposed both of these test tubes to what's called the Schumann frequency, which is the homeostatic frequency of the earth. It's about 7.83 hertz, I believe. And he exposed it for 18 hours. And then when he came back and he tested the second test tube, it showed positive for the virus. And the two things were separated by a number of feet. There was no way, and sealed. There was no way it wasn't about air. And the thing was diluted to the point of non-existence. So and then he did another experiment. Listen to this. Then he used some kind of a high-tech radio frequency device to get the frequency, just the frequency of that test tube with the homeopathic dilution, which science says doesn't exist. And he transmitted it over the internet to another country where he had another test tube of plain water, and it too picked up the frequency and showed positive then for the virus. Now, if that doesn't, and all of this was videotaped, documented, and he won a Nobel Prize. So if this is the case, okay, then how can we even begin to have even a remote or minuscule understanding of anything that's happening around us, be it physical or chemical? So the people that say God doesn't exist, Jesus doesn't exist, none of these things are true, show me the proof. Where's the scientific proof? I mean, if we're looking at a sliver of knowledge, thinking somehow, okay, that this represents everything that's out there and we can't learn anything more, then we're destined to fail. We're destined to live in perpetual ignorance, because there's so much more going on that we've never been exposed to that we can't even understand. And all I would say to you as we close today, and I know this is a little different than what we've done in the past, but it's been a while since I've done one of these sessions, and I kind of had the hankering, right, to do it. So that's why I'm doing it. I think that we have to begin to realize that we not only control our own emotions through our thoughts and actions, but we also control our physiology. And we also, by understanding of these different examples that we talked about tonight, we actually control the frequencies, actions, and emotions of others, maybe more so than we ever thought. So never think for a second that we don't make a difference, because we do. Every one of us is unique and special. We were created that way. And, people can change a lot of things with influence, but they can't change what goes on between our two eyes, right, in our brain. And so we need to focus more importantly on where we want to be rather than where we're at. And I'm telling you tonight, water is a big part of it. And I've done more good for people with this water over the last almost 15 years than I could have done in any other way. And I know this because of the repeat business that we have, because of the people. I mean, there are people that are cheap, and they sometimes go 4 and 5 years without changing filters on their equipment, even though we recommend, every 12 to 14 months. There are people calling in today to my business to pay $179 or $199 for filters, depending on their equipment. And they last ordered from us 5 years ago, even with the economy. And it's because they know what this water is doing for them. Now, if you wait 5 years, there could be sufficient bacteria buildup. You definitely don't need to take probiotics anymore if you wait 5 years on your water system. You really don't want to do that. I would keep it to a year and a half. But the point is the benefits from this water are absolutely outstanding. And even more so, you'll really see it when you've been on it for a while and then you get off of it. That's when it'll really, it's like the stem, you take it for 4 or 5 months, you get these great benefits, and then you just kind of feel normal. You're thinking, well, it's not really working anymore. And, maybe I don't need it. And then you go off it for a couple of weeks and you can really feel that slide, that energy, mental and physical, the aches and pains come back. Sometimes the indigestion comes back. So it's kind of like that. Only I think even more important. It probably is the single most important thing that you can really do easily to control your health and wellness. That would be the energized water. Without a doubt, this has to be the case, because I look at my family of 6, and plus my other daughter. I have 2 grandchildren. She lives with my wonderful son-in-law in Kansas City. She's, by the way, a registered delivery nurse, and, has a ton of background and, science and all the rest of it. And doesn't really think that much of what we talk about is probably true, because she's got the 8 years of chemistry and physics, which is fine, right? I mean, I believe it takes all of us to make a marketplace. I mean, everybody has a place. Everybody fits in, in this wheel of life. And the question you need to ask yourself is, where do you fit in? And if it's about helping people, and especially about helping people, stay well, you couldn't find a better place to be than HelixLife.